As racing heated up the bull rings of the Southeast in the late 1940s, a pair of Virginia brothers emerged as an inseparable team. Glenn drove the cars, but it was his younger brother, Leonard's mechanical genius that would transform NASCAR Grand National racing for generations. Join us as Men Behind the Wrenches takes a look at the cunning Leonard Wood. In the early days of pit stops, a jackman had to pump the jack numerous times to raise the car. The length of the stop didn't really impact the race because everyone used the same equipment. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Hammond and welcome to Men Behind the Wrenches. As teams looked for advantages, one man didn't miss a beat. Leonard Wood looked at the jack and figured out a way to raise the car in 3 pumps, trimming time spent on pit road and giving the Wood brothers a strategic advantage. The jack was just one of the many innovations that Leonard pioneered. Always considered the mechanic of the Wood family, Leonard started tinkering on automobiles at age 7.
My father was a mechanic, and ever since I was born, and I remember getting down in on top of the motor, and he was wanting me to tighten some bolts on the cylinder head, and I took my feet and put against the wall, firewall of the engine compartment, and then I had a long pull handle, and I was pulling on them head bolts, and I remember tightening them tight enough that he didn't have to retighten them.
He was just always working on something, up under a car, in it, under it, on top of it somewhere, That was the basic thing that was always going on. He was always working.
When older brother Glenn decided to try his hand at race car driving, he brought his younger brother along as chief mechanic. Quickly, they formed a partnership with the rest of the family to create Wood Brothers Racing.
It began as a sort of a fun thing to do, and you didn't make any money at it either, so it had to be a fun thing because most of the time you had to take some you already had to make ends meet. But generally we usually in the early days made enough out of it to support the car, but that wasn't very much. All my brothers, I think they kind of looked at me as a mechanic in the family, and then when Glenn took his personal car onto the racetrack nearby here, near Martinsville, and it was a friend had a race car, and he took his personal car and kept up with him, so he figured if he could keep up with him with just his personal car, if he made a race car, he could probably do well.
Through the 50s, Glenn continued to drive while Leonard worked on the cars. In 1956, Ford had been looking to add a new team to their stable and decided to back the Woods. Thus began their long affiliation. Now, Leonard could work with the best equipment. This would be extremely important in his engine designs, which still stand the test of time. The Woods tore up the short tracks in the 50s, and when the era of super speedways dawned, Leonard was ready. He discovered that 500 miles on a big track offered opportunity to make small adjustments to the car. If he tweaked on the car enough, he could find a way to go from worst to first.
We didn't run that many short track races, and so we didn't have a car especially built for short track racing, and we would just use those super speedway cars, and make adjustments, springs, and so on.
Fuel mileage was another favorite strategy for Leonard, especially on super speedways. He found a balance between maximizing his horsepower and fine-tuning his carburetor to conserve fuel.
You always try to get as much mileage as possible and still the car perform well. A lot of times when you get your motor performing well, it makes the motor more efficient, and then it gets better gas mileage.
In 1963, this strategy would pay off as Tiny Lund made one less pit stop than Fred Lorenzen or Ned Jarrett to win the Daytona 500. It would be the Woods' first big win, even as they kept winning races. Leonard consistently sought a competitive edge in engines and chassis that left his rivals in his shadow with every race. That left one uncharted area to explore: pit stops.
I remember Smokey Unix crew, which was the top crew at the time. Took him 45 seconds to change tires and gas at Charlotte. And then so we began working on it. and wasn't too long we was doing it in 25 seconds with 2 tires. Just 2 tires and gas was 25 seconds.
After analyzing the length of a stop, it became obvious to Leonard pit equipment needed an upgrade. His desire for a speedy stop led to the invention of a 3-pump jack. The jack remained a coveted secret for quite a few years until a cameraman photographed it.
The jack's easy to push the handle down, so why not speed it up? I geared the thing to where it was take about 3 strokes to get it up. And then I remember the jack people was at Michigan, and I guess they was filming, seeing this jack come up. So, I mean, the jack companies, naturally, they know what to do to a jack to speed it up, so they began to make them speed it up.
In 1965, Leonard and the Wood Brothers pit crew would be asked by Colin Chapman to pit the legendary Jimmy Clark in the Indianapolis 500. The Wood Brothers crew would cut an average IndyCar pit stop by 2/3, giving Clark enough of an edge for victory.
I think Ford had come close the year before winning a race, but they messed up on pit stops, whoever the team was. And so somebody at Ford recognized that Leonard and Daddy and Clay and Delano and Ray Lee and them were extremely fast on pit stops, so they suggested bring those guys in. And I think some of the people kind of laughed at it, you know, like bringing those guys from down in the mountains of Stewart, Virginia or whatever, to Indianapolis. And they went up several weeks before, and like Leonard basically scoped it out, you know, like how the hoses were made, and he come back and made like venturis and things to fit in the hoses to make the fuel flow quicker. But you know, like when it filled it in 18 seconds, other teams were taking a minute to do that.
They also sat down and said, okay, you know, we get around the racetrack in 30 seconds. We make a pit stop that's 30 seconds. If we can make a pit stop in 15 seconds, we're 15 seconds ahead on the racetrack. So then he sat down and really was the power behind what pit stops are now. Somebody would eventually come with it. He was the first one. He sat down and said, okay, let's make an organized pit crew. Let's figure out what we got to do. So he made the rest of us better because they started setting the pattern.
Leonard's innovation had opened a new era in stock car racing, and he wasn't. By 1968, Cale Yarborough was the driver for the Wood Brothers. For 5 seasons, Yarborough and Leonard worked together on their Ford, winning 13 times, including the 1968 Daytona 500.
I really enjoyed my relationship with the Wood Brothers. They built a great race car and had at that time, and still do, a great pit crew. They really got the job done, and won a lot of races with the Wood Brothers, and really enjoyed that 5 years with them, and ran with them until Ford pulled out.
Leonard continued to win races with drivers Donnie Allison and A.J. Foyt. Foyt would win the Wood Brothers' 3rd Daytona 500 in 1972. The Wood Brothers had A.J. scheduled to only run certain races during the 72 season. For the rest of their schedule, they hired 2-time Winston Cup champion David Pearson. It was the beginning of a special relationship.
We'd watched David Pearson for years, and we knew how competitive he was, and we just hit it the right combination. Like the way we set cars up just fitted him perfect. And he sat on pole, won the first race, and it was one of the greatest relationships I guess anybody ever had. I mean,
David and Leonard communicated so well, and David would tell Leonard what the car was doing, and Leonard would have something to try to make it better, and they constantly did that. And they overlooked each other's shortcomings, whatever they might have been.
David and Leonard got along real well as far as communicating with each other about what the car was doing, and David was the kind of driver that he'd never really let you know what he's doing. You'd think he was doing all he could, and he'd always seem like he could come up with some more.
They worked together so good. They knew what each other was thinking. And Pearson, he was so cool. You know, he'd come in. They didn't change cars back then, like change springs and things back then. He'd come in and Leonard would ask him, "How's the car?" "Pretty good." If he said that, you didn't fool with it. You didn't even practice. You know, you'd skip practicing.
Leonard knew exactly what I wanted, and you didn't see us changing a bunch of springs around here and there and all that stuff. It was usually right when we got to the racetrack. And that's one of the reasons they always said they had such a good success, because they wasn't running all the races, and they had time to work on the car and build it, especially for this racetrack, set it up just for that racetrack. You know, wherever we was running, they would always have a couple of weeks or 3 weeks to have time to get it ready for that race where everybody else was running every week. And so they felt like that was the best for them.
Leonard and Pearson worked hard, but David loved to make Leonard the object of his pranks.
Pearson knew which buttons to push, and you know, Leonard was always prepared. If you were going to go out to qualify, he would want to be the first car in line to qualify, to start the race, whatever. You know, he'd always be prepared, be first, you know, get your stuff done. Well, anytime you were qualifying, anytime, it didn't make any difference where you were, he'd go hide. He'd go hide behind a car, behind the corner of a building, and it's getting like 10 minutes till time for him to go out. And just like clockwork, Leonard would send Lynn or me, go find David. And we knew he was looking, sitting there watching, laughing. We didn't know where he was either. You know, but you could just, but then here we'd go walk around, and sure enough, he'd be right over here laughing about it. He'd get there just in time, get in the car, go do his deal, be done with it.
The following year, the Wood brothers fielded only Pearson and were a huge success, winning 11 times and 18 starts.
It was very impressive, and you know, it's extremely exciting to go out and win and feel like it when you go out that you got a shot at winning. If nothing don't happen, you got a shot at winning, and a very good one, you know. And you realized when David went into the race, if your car was right, you didn't have to worry about the rest of it. I mean, he'd take care of the rest of it.
1973 was only the beginning, as the Wood brothers and Pearson would soon become. By 1976, there was no doubt that the Wood brother-Pearson combination worked. They would win 21 times in their 3-year partnership. During this period, there was one victory that would showcase Leonard's super speedway prowess and Pearson's sly moves, and remains today as one of the classics of all time. The Pearson-Petty duel in the 1976 Daytona 500.
That day, he had me beat, but I drafted by him, going down the backstretch, and he had enough power. I accused him then of having a big engine too. He had enough power when we went into 3. Like I say, I just got in front of him going into 3, and so through 3 and 4, he just built right back down and started right back around me again. You know, just that quick through the corner. And I don't know where he thought he was ahead of me coming off of 4 or not, but I always accused him of going up and blocking me.
When the crowd screamed and hollered, you know, we knew something had happened, and there's a pause, and I'm waiting. They should be here, but they're not. And so I'm looking, and the first thing I saw was Richard coming backwards up against the wall when he come in sight, and then of course he spun around down in the grass, and then I looked down to the inside and hear David spinning around on the inside, and he kept his motor running, you know, the whole time, you know, and he's keying the radio while he's spinning around, and said he hit me, and I didn't know if Richard was going to get his cranked. In fact, I thought Richard was going to just slide right across the finish line, because it slid within 50 feet of the finish line in the grass, and his stalled down there and didn't crank. So David just come right up through the grass and motored right on to the victory.
Through the next 3 years, the Wood brother-Pearson combination would win 6 more times for a total of 48 wins in their time together. But in 1979, the once unbeatable combination started to struggle.
We wasn't working just as hard as sometimes. For whatever reason, you know, things are going to work against you that you're not going to be the best all time, you know. And sometimes you work hard and your combination is the best, and we would begin to get in a little rut there. Things wasn't working as well as it should.
At Darlington, things seemed to unravel for both sides during one pit stop.
Well, they didn't tell me they were going to change 4 tires. You know, all I was expecting was just change 2 to beat Darrell out. Because Darrell was pitting right in front of me, and so when we come in for the pits, of course they did. Glenn was standing there cleaning the windshield because I couldn't see, and while they was changing the right side, he was cleaning the windshield. Well, I didn't see the guy squat down here and take tires loose on the left side because he was standing there, you know, cleaning the windshield. So when they changed the right side, you know, that's all we was talking about, you know, beating Darrell out. So when they changed the right side tires and dropped the jack, which is, you know, signal to go, I took off. Quick as he go around, I took off, and these tires was loose, and I didn't know it. So when we started down pit road, by the time I got to the end of pit road, them tires fell off, you know. So I was sitting like a fool with 2 tires on and 2 gone.
Well, that was just a misunderstanding, and of course, actually, we thought David wanted to. We'd heard some rumors that he wanted to quit racing a little bit, but we was. A lot of people don't know that, but we was just taking it as an incident, and we was getting ready for Martinsville. We was going to race Martinsville, and we're just going to forget about that.
That wasn't really what caused us to separate, I don't think. That put the icing on the cake, in other words. That was, you know, the main part. But we had already got to where we argued a little bit, you know.
They may have gone their separate ways, but even today, there are no hard feelings.
They're the nicest people in the world, and I think the world of them right now, you know. And you can't get no better people than the Woods is right now.
Leonard and the Wood brothers headed into the 80s with a new driver, but would never rekindle the magic they had with the Silver Fox. For nearly 50 years, Leonard Wood's mission has been to find a mechanical edge, mastering the art of being a mechanic.
It was better back then as far as fun and having a good time at it, you know. But as far as money and sponsorships and all that, it's better now. It's so computerized, and, you know, politics plays a big part, you know, and used to you painted your car like you wanted it, and now, not that there's anything wrong with it, but you're going to have to paint it like your sponsor needs it painted, you know, to get the most out of your advertisement. I mean, so sure, it's changed tremendous, and one thing, it's got so many sponsors and got so many cars with so much money behind them that they're all pretty equal. And let's say you come back on the racetrack in 30th place, well, every one of them's capable of outrunning you, and you can't get back to the front, so it's so important to make a quick pit stop and get track position. Like if you get up front on track position, they can't pass you either. So it's changed quite a bit.
Despite the atmosphere change in the sport, one constant remains for Leonard, the thrill of finishing first, which is where the Wood brothers found themselves in March of 2001 at Bristol with driver Elliott Sadler.
When you go into Victory Circle, it still gives you a great feeling. Then you just kind of forget about everything else.
NASCAR may have evolved through the years, but one thought remains unanimous. It was Leonard's vision that moved the sport forward and raised the bar for his fellow crew chiefs.
He just wanted to beat everybody else, I guess, at what they're doing and do it himself. Like I've said before, today the people, you'll buy a transmission or you buy an engine or you buy this or that. Back when he was doing it, most of it was done himself, and he just liked to beat the best with something he'd done himself.
He's very innovative, you know, even as much as just call him an inventor. And he can make things. In those years, you couldn't buy a lot of parts for Fords. You know, most people ran Chevrolets or Chryslers. And you couldn't go to here or there and just get whatever you needed. You had to make it.
He just does his thing. He don't bother anybody. He don't want nobody bothering him. He just wants to come, do the very best job he can. When it's over with, go home. So the publicity and all that stuff, he's not big on that at all. That's not what he does it for. He does it for, I think, for self-satisfaction. Whether you think it's right or what, he don't care. As long as he in himself feels good about it, then I think that's him.
Yeah, Leonard he was probably one of the few people that could have built the motors and built the transmission, built the rear end, built the car, and stuffed the driver in and raced it. Leonard had that ability, and he could have done it all by himself. I don't know how long it would have took him, just on account of the labor that it would have took. He would have been fast at it, but it would have took that long. But Leonard could have done it all.
I feel like I worked hard, and I thought about it, you know, at night and what I could do to make the car better. But I decided I wasn't going to let it get the best of me. I decided, you know, you do all you can do, and that's all you can do, and there's no use worrying about the rest of it. I mean, that's it, you know, and worrying is not going to help anything. So I always try to look at it that way. But no matter what we made, we still made a good living, had a lot of fun, and that's what life's all about.
As you walk through a Winston Cup garage, you can see Leonard Wood's fingerprints everywhere. With 98 victories, the Wood brothers are third on the all-time owner win list. Each win had Leonard's unique mark on it. He's a true legend. For Men Behind the Wrenches, I'm Jeff Hammond. Thanks for watching.